Welcome to Getting Back Up, where grief meets growth.
Two men, two fathers, and one shared journey of rebuilding.
We're talking about life after cancer, love, loss, and everything no one tells you.
How you doing? This is Jamal Jones.
And I'm David McClain.
And this is the Getting Back Up podcast, Finding Life After Death.
Well, Jamal, we're back on the road again, and this time we are in a place you know all too well, Austin.
Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Home. Old home, but hot home.
Yes.
It's definitely warmer than home is right now.
It's a welcome change.
I don't mind 60 degrees. It's getting off the airplane at midnight. I'm okay with that.
Yes.
It's not negative.
Absolutely.
20 degrees.
But what we have is a very, very fun, exciting. It's everything because it's serious, and we just know the energy that our guest brings to the conversation.
Yes.
So we're really looking forward to speaking to Jocelyn Barrera.
Yes.
And I will kind of give more about that as we move along. But
yeah,
we're just really excited to have
I mean, I think in this series, right, where we really want to make sure that we're not just bringing our amazing voices in every conversation, but we're also bringing conversations from the extended community that's out there supporting those dealing with mental health issues, grief, stress management, all the things that is packaged into who we all are, these complicated things that we are as humans.
Particularly loss. And I think you'll hear from Jocelyn's background and the work that she and her colleagues do, particularly as it relates to the loss of a child and that grieving process and coming back to life in the way that you can. So we welcome in Jocelyn Barrera. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Great. So glad to see you.
Thank you for welcoming us here as well. This is great.
Sure. Thanks for having me. And our space is open to everyone, so I'm glad that y'all got to utilize it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to give people a sense of the depth and the diversity that she is bringing to the Christi Center. Top line for her, Jocelyn Barrera. She's a bilingual licensed clinical social worker and expert on the areas of mental health, child abuse and neglect, intimate partner violence, and significant trauma. She currently serves as the executive and clinical director of the Christi Center, a nonprofit organization that offers hope after the death of a loved one by providing support networks, community education, and therapeutic activities that are free, peer-based, and ongoing. By combining her expertise in mental health with her passion for community, Jocelyn is dedicated to helping people connect with their emotions by actively listening to their stories. And that's where I want to start, is your personal story, in the sense of how you were raised, how you maybe witnessed or dealt with trauma, loss growing up. So tell us about growing up in your household to start.
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm mostly from Texas, but my parents are from Mexico, and they immigrated over here back in the 80s, and they originally lived in California, and that's where I was born with my brother. And so we moved around a lot. We landed in Texas probably when I was about 5 or 6. So I've been here. Consider myself a lifelong Texan now at this point. I think one of the things that I off the bat noticed quickly, we grew up in Tennessee for a little bit, just a couple years. And one of the things I picked up on a lot was very overt racism in Tennessee.
You don't say.
Well, as a child, like explaining that to your kiddos, like, what does it mean for people to not like you because of the way you speak, the way you act? People would yell at my mom, like, go back to Mexico in front of us and things like that. And it was very, looking back, traumatic, because looking now, like, I would never want that for my children, right? Like, to grow up in a place where people are yelling things or saying things to you just for existing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say that to two Black men, right? But when we moved down here, I would say the racism changed and shifted a lot more covertly. Because one of the things I noticed the most was we are very involved with our family in Mexico. We would often go back and see them. A lot of the families that we lived around had been in Texas for years and generations.
Right.
And so they were not allowed to speak Spanish in their household because they were punished for being Mexican or Hispanic, mostly Mexican, right, from the immigration here in Texas. But and so for us to be out and about, like very, people would like go back past our house and they're like, wow, you guys just have too many colors, too many plants, too many things, right? And it's like, well, yeah, we have piñatas, we have carne asadas, right? Like that's just our life. And my parents celebrated that, right? Like that's just who we were going to be. And it sucked, right? And a lot of conversations with our parents about, that's just how life is, right? Like unfortunately right now. And, like, please don't stop being you. And so I got a lot of that internal messaging. And so I still see that here in Austin. It's just so different. And this was in South Texas. Now moving here in Texas, or Austin, I've been here for 20 years, give or take. And the racism here is just so different. And I think it is generational trauma, right? Just because of this sense of less than. Because you live on this side, if you're from here in Austin, you live on this side of 35, right? You don't have access to things. And I just heard a story about how, like in Dub Springs, the 78744, they still don't have HEBs, grocery stores. They don't have food deserts, right? Because, and what has who's historically lived there.
Right.
And so I think it just shifts, and you have to learn, especially as a social worker, learn the community and the history that you're living in and what you're seeing. I think that is the trauma that we, like I grew up under, like, generationally.
Yeah.
And then what I've just seen and witnessed and worked on. My husband is from Iowa, very white. Just so different, right? Like he's like, what do you mean? Like I've never heard these things. Like I've never witnessed things. Because and just even like learning about the 35 divide for him was like eye-opening of that's just not something we witnessed or saw in Iowa. It was just so vastly different. And so I think that's always what I teach our interns here and people who move to Austin is like, get to know the culture and the community that you're in, because it really does impact not only it's that foundation that you grow up under and then how you view things that happen to you, like those traumas that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you remember with your parents having the discussion? How did they work through some of the differences and assimilation to a great extent?
I think they both dealt with it very differently. My dad grew up in Tijuana, which is on the border of San Diego and in Mexico, and he was very much like, we have to assimilate, we have to blend in, we have to like lay low.
Yeah.
Let's watch NFL.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Big NFL guy. But he, like, for example, his name is Jorge, and he would always tell people, my name is George, right? And trying to blend in. And he still to this day, my brother is also named Jorge, and he will call him George. Yeah. And just because he's like, that's how we blend in. You don't like say anything, you don't do anything. You just try to go with the flow, try not to disturb the, make ripples.
Norms, yeah.
And my mom was like, I can't change who I am, right? Like I am Mexican. And she's one of the reasons kind of I went into grief, because she is kind of unapologetically who she is. She is very much, like I speak Spanish. And yeah, she does, she is definitely one of those like timid people who like, I don't speak English very well. I'm going to hide or crouch in those harder conversations, or I'm not going to say anything when people are talking in English, even though I understand everything and I could probably
which is a benefit, probably.
Right.
Too.
But, I think I wish I had seen more from her of like, kind of what I'm saying with like our house and our home and our culture, like it was okay to do it in a group or with our family all together, but just more individually, it was harder for her.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I think, my family is from Panama. And similarly, I always, my parents will, fault me. They're like, you don't speak Spanish. I was like, you didn't speak Spanish.
That's your fault.
You didn't speak Spanish in the house. And the minute we started picking it up and started speaking it, you stopped speaking around us because, so it went from speaking Spanish to whispering, right? So, I think that was something for them as well. And, my dad, his name is Miguel, but I remember for a period of time, he was Mike or Michael, right? And now he's older and he's retired and he doesn't care about, working in corporate. So he's Miguel, right? So, and I think it is that ebb and flow of like, how do you process that as a child and process that, that core element of your own identity, right? Where your parents are trying to navigate this new world and trying to fit in. And I think there's a part of that does kind of stay with you even till adulthood. My middle name is Miguel and I proudly wear it, right? I don't, I tell people like, my family's from Panama, my middle's name Miguel. Like, you speak Spanish? No, I don't speak Spanish, right? But at the same time, I think there's a part where I think when you kind of connect that to who your family is, and as you think about grief and that identity piece, being able to kind of tie those things together in a way that allows you to formulate a view of who is this person that you lost potentially, or what was your family like and their relevance and their roles. And then to your point, like being able to see kind of this almost, this different approach by both your parents in the identity of your family. So I think that's a really interesting perspective. And, my mom is similar. She's a little bit more low key and my dad is. And
Your mother low key?
after a couple glasses of wine.
Okay, I'm ready, guys. I enjoy your mother.
Yeah. After a couple glasses of wine, she's definitely a talker. But I think, but I think it does. It does allow you to kind of say, like, how is my family representing themselves and navigating different elements of racism or different elements of prejudice in certain ways, right? I think that's something that, people don't really think about. So it's interesting that you created this bridge that allowed this piece of identity and this experience with racism to kind of be this bridge into kind of social work and helping people for you.
And a real contribution to the community that may not have the voice, may not have the experience to talk about it in a way that, because of your training and bilingual aspect, and so speak a little bit about that.
That's one of the things I think people are shying away from more because it is scary, right, to talk about race, and especially in this political climate and things. But, as I feel like it's such a detriment to folks if we don't name it, right? It's like people are coming to me and they're like, I'm worried about this, but the reason I'm worried is because I'm seeing grief in our community, right? Because of the loss of life, for example, in Minnesota, or, school shootings or things like that, or potentially racially motivated violence, right? And most of the time these things are triggered because, right, like our grief is triggered because of the things we're seeing on. And so sometimes just even naming that for people, it is helpful because they're like, I guess I didn't put it together. Or, what, like I've had a lot of clients who talk about doom scrolling, right? And it's just like, I'm just constantly seeing this like negativity, awful things. What do I do? What do I do? Right. And helping them set those boundaries. But then also, like, let's talk about this. Like, why is it impacting you? And why is it, like, especially here in Texas, like, why is that different from clients from, I don't know, Iowa, for example, right? Like, there are different elements that are impacting us. And I think it is very important to talk about that with our clients because it does impact our grief, right? It does shift why we feel a certain way, why things are coming up more, why things are not coming up more, why, this is happening to a certain community. I think it's all unfortunately integrated. And so first, like, let's name why we're feeling this way. And then what do we do with these feelings? Yeah.
It's interesting. I think we've talked about this as our podcast journey, has evolved for Getting Back Up. We've talked about, we talked about the doorway for us was loss of our late spouses, but through conversation, we've talked about people who've, lost their families to divorce, right? Lost their family structure, lost their jobs, things of that. One element you bring up is obviously, I think we're seeing the loss of life as an example, being caused by kind of some of the heightened tension in our country right now. But I think another element of loss that probably isn't discussed enough, and would love your perspective here, is the loss of community structure and the loss of family structure as a result of, families being broken up, or just people staying in their homes because of fear. I mean, that's one thing that I've heard and read about, is just entire communities where no one's walking in the street anymore because people are just afraid. Right. So, I mean, can you touch on that one a little bit in the context of how it presents itself in a grief capacity?
Well, so many ways, right? I think one of the biggest things, my previous experience was working in child advocacy. I worked with a lot of children who had instances of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And one of the biggest losses that they experienced was loss of safety, like the way they look at the world, right? Like, are you a safe person? Is this a safe place? Can I leave my home? Can I go to school? Right. And I think that to me was, like the biggest impact, because not only is it happening to those children, but it's happening to their families. But then even here, right, where people are seeing these same things of like so many acts of violence happening in our world that are unpredictable or don't know when it's going to happen. And so now we're, as a community, facing that loss of security, right? Just even that basic, what happens if I leave my house, if we go to, I don't know, a mall or a church, or right now, unfortunately, with, people experiencing this violence in our communities where, people are scared to leave their homes because I don't know if I'll come back. I've had clients tell me that they've been wearing air tags in their shoes. So that way their family knows if something happens to me, you can hopefully find me, right? And so this just like sense of, I guess, like a safety checklist for yourself of like, this is what we have to live, like what I have to do right now. And I think this is kind of currently how we're feeling, but I've seen this over the last couple, like as a social worker, thinking back to the days of like, do you remember when we used to X, right? Like as communities get together and do things like have coffees or be in our communities together. And recently, right, exactly. And I think that since, in the last couple of years, post coming back to normalcy, if you will, we've lost that sense of like community, right? We're just kind of in our homes. We're not even, my mom says this to me. She's like, you don't talk to your neighbors. And I'm like, well, one of them's not here. One of them, they're in and out all the time, right? And she's like, yeah, and you could do better. Which is very true. But I think we're living in that realm, right? We have a lot of people from Austin too, like who don't know about, the Christi Center. But I think because that lack of word of mouth, right? Like we're not connecting to people anymore because I don't know my neighbors. They moved here during the pandemic and we've never really talked. I see them like this. And I think that's part of it, is that we're not connecting with each other, but then there's also this like this safety, like this feeling of like, I don't know if I should, right? Feeling like it's harder to connect with people.
Yeah. What, as you've been in this role, or at the Christi Center for a few years, and in this role, in the last couple, what is something about the job, about what you do that like surprises you the most?
That's a good question. Well, I'm in this dual role of a clinical and executive director, and I've been serving there for a couple years, which is not my favorite, but I'm here. we're here, and we're making it work. But I think one of the things that surprises me the most is how much people are still, I guess, discounting grief as a mental health issue. It's still really surprising to me because there is so much grief in our community. And, one of the biggest things that we talk about here at the center is that everybody goes through grief, unfortunately. And maybe you don't have a death loss, but you definitely have some loss in your life, right? Whether that's, oh, I lost, my best friend moved away, or we lost our puppy, or, like the loss of a dream or hope, loss of like our country, right? Like all of these things happen to us. And maybe, some of us are really good at talking about our mental health and getting that support, or have that support built into our families and our neighborhoods and things like that. but a lot of people don't, right? There is still this stigma, like even, we joke about this, like we're the death ladies, right? Most of us are women that are here at the Christi Center. But just this idea of like, oh yeah, they talk about death, like, oh, and then like people like walk away from our table or something, right? Like it's contagious.
Yeah.
And I think we hear that so much from our families as well, like people who have a loss to overdose. They're like, oh, well, I need to know exactly what happened so I know it can't happen to me, right?
Right.
This sense of contagion. And I think that's so very prevalent, unfortunately. And like, even though there's great podcasts like this, right? Like we've had so much great education and movement, but there's still this sense of like, we just don't talk about it, or you have to move on. It's time to let them go. And it sucks because I do think grief is one of the foundational pieces of our mental health. Like how we deal with grief impacts a lot of our lives, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
it is, for example, like one of the things that when I was during my tenure here, I lost a dog, right? And but he was my, I couldn't have babies dog, right? Like, so when he died, he had cancer several times, right? We put a lot of money into this dog, so, but he died and it was really heavy. And I'm like, to this day, I don't want any dogs, right? I like in my son still talks about it, right? He talks about like, yeah, we had a dog and he died and it's been several years. And so to me, that's really important, like being able to name it and talk about it. Like, this is why we don't have that. Or I can't wait for my mom to be able to, better regulate herself so we can have another dog.
Yeah.
But just like this idea of like being able to say that, right? Like I lost a child and I still miss them and I still want to talk about them and I still want people to know about them. And I think that's just so important because our overarching society says, move on, let it go. It's mute.
Yeah,
right?
we talk about that a lot. I think obviously once we started the podcast, we had questions of, why are you doing this? Is this a homage to your late wives? And have you gotten past the grief? And we continue to talk about it. Grief is a continuum.
Yeah.
It is a journey. It's not a race. And the other piece of it is back to your point on like the different aspects of grief. We've had conversations, or we started our first few shows specifically talking about our experiences losing our wives, the dynamics, going through the kind of phased, I'll say, story, so to speak, of that. And, there were several people who were like in kind of engaged, and then they would reach out to us, oh my gosh, that triggered this thought that I had that I didn't think of, as far as my own father, when my mother passed away, and what's he going through,
And unresolved.
grief, right? And I think it allows you, to your point, like the dynamics of grief are so complex, and but then also when you talk about it, the same way David and I, our friendship bonded. We created our friendship. One, our daughter set us up on a play date. All right. But then also, once we started talking, we had this familiar experience that helped to foster our friendship. My wife and I, Jordan, we were colleagues and, friends at the time. But as my late wife passed away and I began to kind of figure out what's next for myself, her stepmother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So a year later, her dog passed, from cancer. Probably a month before that, my dog passed from old age. So we both experienced so much personal challenge in our life, but it also allowed us to create a bond. And that bond is something that, we believe helped to strengthen our friendship and then eventually the relationship. And I think, to your point, when people don't talk about these things, I think you lose this element of, yes, how do you process it? But you also lose an element of connecting with people.
Right.
Yeah, and just building the mechanics for this is going to happen again.
Yeah.
And it's never easy, but you can anticipate, I've been here before, these emotions will come to the surface. This is the best I'm going to do so I can move forward in life for the sake of the people around me and kind of for your own development, because you're still among the living, you're still moving forward. You can't stay in the same place.
Right.
So.
Right. But a lot of people do, right? Like I think, and don't recognize like I think, yeah, it's like a mental health learning experience. Like people need to learn about their mental health of like you can get stuck, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you do need that extra support in community.
Yeah, and what we talk about and you do every day, this is not light dinner conversations as it relates to loss and grief. So I guess the question we would have for you is, how do you stay so grounded and energized in the work that you continue to do?
Well, I think it is like the recognition of supporting people and getting to know them and being able to be a touchstone in their lives as they're doing this work. I think part of, I always tell folks, like, you're welcome to come to the Christi Center. I love my job. I love it here. However, I think the biggest thing is to take away from us is maybe you use our services, maybe you give us a call, maybe you read our website, but recognizing that you're not doing this alone, right? That there are other folks going through similar things that may have had similar experiences, that there's a whole community out there waiting for you. And hopefully we're on that part of that community, but we don't have to be, right? Like some people learn that, okay, I'm not a community person, but I just need my, like my jogging people. Okay, great. Well, how do we help you get back to that, right? Like how do you like bounce back after this loss to the things that you loved, and maybe they've changed, right? Maybe they've shifted and that's no longer serving you. It's like, what can we do to support you to find what brings you back to like your, like what can feel like your new normal? And I hate that phrase, but just helping people recognize like life is going to change and it's going to shift and it sucks, and there's still people out there to support you. So I think that's one. The other piece is, my family and being able to support them and see them grow. I have 2 children, one who is adopted out of the foster care system. And he is 7 and really adorable, but he is the one that made me turn off my phone to do not disturb because he makes some bad choices at school. But it's part of life. But I think one of the things that I guess I didn't recognize I was going to do as a social worker is like teach him so many things, right? Like the other day, like he was telling somebody about like what do your parents do, right? And it's always like, what are you gonna say? And he was like, my mom talks to people after they've had a death. And I was like, exactly what I do, right? Like, I love it. And he, like being able to say like, it's really hard. And he, of course, he, in his little life, he had a couple losses, but mostly the dog has been the big one, right, for him. And so even to this day, being able to say, we had a dog and he died, and it makes me really sad. And I can see my mom is sad, right? But just like this recognition of like, even at a young age for me, makes me really happy of like, oh, okay, like this is what kids are supposed to feel like and understand. And it is sad and it is heartbreaking to see them, have these losses, but also being able to talk about it intentionally, being able to talk to their friends about it and their community instead of isolating and feeling like, oh, I can't talk to anybody about this. I don't want to be with anyone. I don't want to talk about this because it's going to make my mom sad, right? But just being able to have those open conversations, I think it makes me really happy to be able to do this work.
Yeah. No, I think that's, Dave and I talk often. I have a 16-year-old, 21-year-old, you have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old.
14, 16.
Yeah.
And 31.
Yeah. You. No, for me, 16, 21, and 31. And then 5.
Right.
14, 16 for me. And 14. Yeah. Sorry. But we often talk, particularly about, particularly in regard to the ones who lost their moms, having those moments where they do open up, having those moments where they do express, having, for David and I, especially, but, for you, it was recently, your wife had recently passed away when our daughters became friends. For them to have that conversation with each other at 12 years old.
Wow.
And I have something they identify with. We don't know the capacity or the extent of which they had the conversations, but the fact that they shared it with each other.
Yeah.
And then they, my daughter said, hey, Dad, I think you should meet this guy.
To identify that.
And her daughter saying the same thing to him, like, you guys should talk, right? Like that for me was like, oh, wait, you're talking about this. That's good, right? Like, and I think to your point, like being able for them to be able to have words that they are comfortable using, words that they feel safe using, going into different venues or events and things of that sort now that they're getting older, and actually saying, hey, like, yeah, like, my mom passed away, or, no, this is my stepmom, and, introducing my wife now in a different capacity than she probably would if, her mother was actually here. So I think those are things that I think we often talk about, like the healthy ways that we can get our kids to navigate it, and the ways that we help them process it as well.
Yeah.
When you think about, because you started your career kind of as in the services coordinator and leveraging, your skills and being bilingual way more so than I wish, than I am capable of.
The misstep of your parents.
Yeah, I blame that. It's all her fault. Like, and now you worked your way up to a dual role, right? Wearing more hats than you want to, probably.
Yes.
But what are some of the key lessons or the most important lesson that you believe has helped you throughout this journey, that even helps you, through this point today?
Yeah, that's a really good, I have a really good answer for this, because I started off, I was getting my clinical licensure. So I was a licensed master's social worker working towards my clinical licensure of LCSW, but at the time I got hired. And one of the things I really struggled with was, as a clinical person, trying to diagnose and do one of the things they teach you as you're getting their clinical licensure was assessment, treatment, and diagnosis. And, everybody walking in your office, like, what are you assessing them with? What is their diagnosis, and what's your treatment plan? And that I really struggled with here, because I had numerous conversations with the program director, who I'm still in touch with and I love, but grief is not a diagnosis, right? I think that was one of the biggest struggles for me, because what do we think of as a therapist, right? This person has generalized anxiety. This person has clinical depression. This person has, right, like XYZ. That was the thing that I was hung up on, is that, oh my gosh, this person has depression. No, it's grief, right? Like they have a complex grief experience, or it's turned into this long depression because they don't have the support that they need during their grief experience, right? And so one of the things that I've learned is that, yes, there may be diagnoses in there, right? People may have come to their experience their grief during, having had generalized anxiety or bipolar or something, and that grief is changing that or shifting it, making it much worse, making it look different. But the grief itself is not a diagnosis. There's nothing to fix, right? Quote unquote. It is not something to, and I always say, like, I wish I had a magic wand to make it better, but that would bringing your person back, right? And so as a person who, as a clinician, I'm like, yes, one of the things that insurance companies and medical professionals want us to do is diagnose.
Right.
But with grief, it's like, there is nothing to diagnose.
Right.
Yes, there may be other complicating factors, but really the grief, that all the things that you're experiencing can be normal. And we don't know if they're normal because we don't know your whole life experience quite yet, right?
Yeah.
Because of all the other grief experiences that you've had, or because of your trauma history, or because of you're moving around a lot, and this is why your grief is looking like this.
Yeah.
But there's no, right? Like, there's no diagnoses here.
You hit on something that's very, very important, because that loss will always be there. And there'll be other ones in many cases. And as you said, there's no magic wand that takes all that away. And it's this sense of how you approach it. Does it keep you in one place? Do you understand all the ramifications around this, how it's going to affect everything else? Not only people around you, but maybe the children that you're raising. What are you teaching them? So, yeah, you make a really solid point about this. It's not a diagnosis in that sense.
Yeah, and that really resonates. We just did a 2-part series about, called The Loop of Regret. And part of it does talk about the complexity of grief, like how many things are tied up in that grief. And to your point of, like, what is the diagnosis? It's everything.
Right.
I could think back to me. For me, it was depression. It was adjustment disorder. It was like very,
name it.
You name it.
Right?
So, like, all the different things. And I remember seeing it, right? When they would, submit it to my insurance. And I'm like, adjustment disorder. I don't feel like I have adjustment disorder.
That's the one we always put.
But I mean, if you think about, it's a very complex, dynamic. And imagine for children, we joke about men who can't find words, right, to express what we're feeling. But children, in some cases, are still forming depending on the age, still forming the vocabulary to say and express so many different things, let alone you add, a complicated grief to it.
Right. Yeah. And I think you already addressed, which is something we want to know, is why all of this matters.
Yeah.
This conversation around grief, labeling it, as you have said before. So then you feel breaking it up into pieces. Let's deal with this because it's going to happen again, or know what the remembrance or the pain. This is all related to this. So you want to say how that matters even more, particularly for children who have gone through that loss.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest thing that we do here at the Christi Center, we have our groups, right, that we do peer support. And to me, that is really important because you're walking in a room and you already know, like, we've all had a loss here. Maybe we don't have the same loss, but we have all had a loss. And so I think there's that sense of community walking in, period, that helps. But then also what we're learning and experiencing together is like, what do I say? Like, how do I talk about this? What do I do? And that's the whole point of our open-ended peer support groups, is that maybe I've had a loss and it was 10 years ago, but you had a loss now. And I'm telling you, well, this is what I did, right? This is what helped me. Or I went to this, like, I didn't tell anybody about it. And that really helped me, right? I just needed to just get through first grade or whatever it is, right? And helping kids identify that for themselves and each other, but then also giving them the, vocabulary of, like, I remember being here and teaching a kiddo, like, what anxiety was, right? Because they've never heard the word because they don't talk about mental health at home. Right. And so then they were like, oh yeah, like, I do sit at night, oh my gosh, what's tomorrow going to look like? Do I have to fill out this form? What about this? And what about that? And I'm like, that's anxiety, right? Like, and now that you know what it is, what do we do with it? Like, what do you do in the middle of the night when you're worried about that? Well, I can talk to my mom, or I can watch TV for a little bit, or, at school when I'm feeling that way, I go to the counselor's office. And so helping them, what do I do with this, right? And then, of course, recognizing, like, helping their parents recognize that it will shift, right? It might look like that right now, but when they go to middle school, this is going to look different because they've now unlocked another part of their brain, right? Like, now it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm thinking about my identity and religion and how does that play into my loss? And, like, how other people talk about me. It's so different than when I was in 5th grade, right? And so helping them identify, like, all of those steps, but then a lot of educating our parents and caregivers of how do you support them? And then how do you also work on your grief, right? Because I've had, when they're really little, they keep asking the same questions. Like, when is grandma going to come back? Why did dad leave us? And so helping them, like, that is really challenging, right? Especially if you're like, I was just feeling okay, and then my 3-year-old came back and now I'm crying again. Now what do I do, right? And so helping them recognize, like, yes, you're grieving and you still have to support your child in this. And that might be really challenging. How do you get that community? How do you get that support? How do you take care of yourself and then also take care of them?
Yeah. No, I think that's really insightful, being able to, it is a dual role, right? You have to be, I think, at least I know we've talked about this as we've thought about, like, the value of the podcast. We always, like, for us, it's making sure that other people are okay here in this conversation. They and role modeling, they'll be okay having the conversation and thinking about it. But it also helps people and us to tune more into the grieving process and to tune more into supporting our kids, and being able to kind of manage the dual role, right, of grief, but also enabling the children to grieve properly or in a healthy way.
And it doesn't end.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other milestones may bring other emotions to the surface, that absence. Right. And I wish my mother were here for that, or my father was here as I meet this man. What would he think of this man, those kinds of things.
Or we just had 2 milestones, right? Like,
Yes, we did.
both of our daughters literally in the same week turned 16.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right. So for 2 dads, number one, oh my gosh, my daughter's 16. Look at her wearing this dress. Oh my, but then the flip side of it is the element where their late moms aren't here, and the responsibility, the insecurities, all of the emotions that we feel going into this moment. And this is we talk about the milestones, another milestone, another season that they are here, that they continue without their mothers.
Jocelyn, are there a lot of your clients that have ongoing conversations with you? You've known them since they were 5, and then later on you're seeing them at 20. I guess during the extent of...
I was going to say I'm not that old.
No.
I like to think I'm not that old, but yes, I have had
I'm saying multiple decades where we talk about these milestones as they go.
Yeah, we see people, because we're open-ended, we see people at different parts, that sometimes they're starting immediately after the loss, sometimes a couple months, couple years, just depending on when they're able to work on their grief. But in my experience here, I've had worked with, that they started as children and now they're in the teen group or the adult group. And part of that is not that, I think one of the things that people hear when I say that is that they're worried. They're like, I have to keep working on this for a long time, or I have to keep going to groups and getting support. That's not what I'm saying. What happens is exactly what y'all just talked about, is like a different milestone has shifted that grief. And so now they're coming back because something else is coming up, or they've had another loss, or they've had a shift in their life, right? Like I've seen children, like as young as 5, and then they come back as 12-year-olds because the dynamics in their life are so different, right? And maybe not at home, but like at school, right? Like, oh, now you're a big kid, right? Now you have to be responsible for yourself. They're thinking like, what would this look like when if my mom was here, or my dad, or my grandma, right? Whoever they lost. I've also seen people come to our groups on and off, right? One of the first groups I attended, we have a loss to crime group, and that one is specific for people who've experienced death to crime. And the first time I came was this person who had their sibling murdered, and they hadn't come in 10 years, and our facilitator was like really excited and was like, I haven't seen you in so long. Well, they had just caught the person who had murdered their sibling 10 years ago. And so they had come 10 years ago, stopped coming because they're like, I worked through it. But now it feels like it started all over again because they're about to prosecute this person, right? And so we see that happen so often, and we're so excited when that happens, just to be able that they recognize there's a place to go. I know the people there. I know there's a place I can talk about this. I know they're going to, I know exactly what time they're going to be open, right? And so having that space is so important to be able to just welcome people, know that there's always like a group going on, support going on.
Yeah.
I know there's a community there.
That's huge. I mean, I think, and you can probably think about that person who was open to returning has probably recommended it to other people throughout the course of their lives as well. They've probably said to friends and family and others who've gone through there, like, hey, you should probably go check out, the Christi Center. So
that's incredible.
I think that's a hard one to follow.
We'll leave it right there. Thanks to that. But Jocelyn, that is quite a story and then this person can kind of put it all together.
Yeah.
Now at this point, and you guys can help that person through, here's another chapter, what this is going to mean to you moving forward, and so that you have the building blocks to do that right now. So that's incredible, the work that you do free. Yeah. So avail yourselves.
Yeah, people, there are resources out there like the Christi Center. So sometimes, yes, insurance and costs, but there's a lot of resources out in the community. People like Jocelyn who are out there trying to help you.
Yeah.
Trying to, make sure you've got the tools that you need. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Energetic.
Yes.
And excited to see people's.
And sometimes bilingual.
And sometimes bilingual.
Yes, what you.
So Jocelyn, we really thank you for this time that you shared with us. Now, hard turn.
Hard turn, yes.
So this is something dear to our heart, this point in our podcast.
Yes, music is...
It's everything.
It's everything. Yeah, it's
soundtrack.
It's a soundtrack to the lives. It tames the savage beasts.
Or brings it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Depending where you want.
Yeah. It's got me through some Texas runs for sure. Some 100-degree. I think I've done my on record, according to. I'm not going to give any promos for the app.
Okay.
But on record, on the app that I use to track my runs.
Yes.
My fastest run ever.
Right.
101 degrees.
Yes. Ooh, Lord have mercy.
In Austin, Texas.
Humidity kicking you behind.
Yeah.
And those hills.
And the hills. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So with that, I don't remember what song I was listening to, but for you, what is, if you think about like the music that kind of motivates you, or what's hot on your playlist right now, your go-to song?
What brings you with the energy to approach each day, maybe here at the Christi Center?
Yeah.
And then after quite a day, what you're putting in, maybe it's silence too.
Yeah.
I don't know that, but
Yeah.
you let us know what's that music that kind of gets you through your day.
Yeah.
This is so embarrassing. We were listening to K-pop Demon Hunter.
Oh yes,
on the way here
everywhere
with my son. Had it on in the car yesterday when I picked him up, and I was like, you know what? It's hype. It's hyping me up to get me here.
Okay.
I don't typically listen to that. But it was really good. But I listen to a lot of Chapel Roan, Pink Pony Club. I think was my theme song of last year. Like just happy, exciting. One makes you want to dance, right? Like listen to a lot of her. My husband's a big alt rock fan, so I've got a lot of that on my playlist. Actually, that's what I was listening to. That's what I was listening to.
Okay.
Coming back because I was. Then changed it to NPR, and then I was like, no, I can't listen to this right now.
It's good, right?
I think that's definitely something too. Is like sometimes when you're walking out of here, I'm like, I can't listen to news, I can't listen to anything else anymore.
Yeah.
Them Crooked Vultures was what I was listening to.
Hey.
Yeah.
I like it. You're bringing something here. Yeah. To add to the playlist.
I like it.
So
definitely.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, your successful work here, your meaningful work here. It's really important. And then also your playlist. Yeah.
Exactly.
Appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you for your time and just bringing us into this space to hear the story and the ongoing success of different clients who have come through and have benefited greatly from all that you and your staff have created, this space, this nurturing space to grow. So we really appreciate all that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jocelyn Barrera.
Thank you.
Man, Jamal, another good story.
Another
from
one.
people. Just incredible contributions.
I love that we've extended this project, this work that we do beyond, our work, right? Really extending it to people and professionals who are also out there helping people deal with loss, grief, stress, all of the different things, right, that we deal with.
And I think particularly children. And what is the appropriate words? What is putting labels on? Okay, you're feeling this, but the clinical word may be that. That's not going to work to move them where they need to be and to be well-rounded in this space.
Yeah,
and
Jocelyn's doing amazing work.
Yeah, Jocelyn Barrera at Christi Center is absolutely doing that, and her staff. So we really appreciate the time that she gave us. Hopefully we can connect with her again and hear everything is moving along, and just pay careful, close attention to the work that they're doing here.
Yeah.
So thanks again for listening to us. Hit us on all our socials. Let us know what you think. Comments.
Like us, subscribe.
Do it all.
Thumbs up, the 4 stars, whatever options are in that corner thing over there.
There it is.
Corner thing over there.
Or somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
check that box. That's how we get, reach. That's how we reach more people, how our podcast, grows, how we can reach more fans, more of our community who's trying to find a space to hear and be motivated that you can get back up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Getting Back Up, Finding Life After Death. If something in today's episode spoke to you, pass it on, because somebody out there needs to hear it.
For sure. We're on all the social mausoleums, so follow us on Instagram, Threads, TikTok. Mostly it will be in the form of Get Back Up Podcast.
And be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast.
And remember, getting knocked down is part of life.
But getting back up is how we live.
We'll see y'all next time.